Phillies pitchers and catchers have reported, and Frank will be in Clearwater to cover the Phils and all season long at Citizens Bank Park with us now on 97.3 ESPN. Happy Pitchers and Catchers Day, Frank.
Yeah, happy pitchers and catchers. I think it's another holiday too, but this is the only one that matters.
This one is far more enjoyable than the other one there, but
that's right.
This team has not been very interesting the last couple of years. Would you say that this season is at least interesting?
I would say so. The Phillies have a couple of the young players finally in place. You're really going to get to see a full season of J.P. Crawford. You're going to get a full season of Rhys Hoskins. These are names that you've been hearing for so long. It feels like, and finally you're going to get an opening day where they're just kind of unleashed, and you get to see what they do. And on top of that, they added Carlos Santana. So, nice big veteran bat that's been a stable force in baseball for the last several years. So it seems like it's finally starting to shape up, finally starting to come together. They're not all the way there, but it's close enough that you're going to actually see what fans have been waiting for many years.
Yeah, I think if you start with this team, we got to start with the new manager, and just how much that will change the look and feel of this team.
Yeah, a lot of that remains to be seen. Gabe Kapler, we already see so far he's doing some unconventional type things, like starting the day later for the workouts. He's not a crack of dawn type manager like other people have. Totally different for players used to that. He seems to want them to take breaks and go get massages and stuff like that. So, in terms of diet, he's trying to reinforce some healthy habits. So he's a very different presence than they're used to having, and it'd be very, very interesting to see just kind of how it plays out over the course of a season.
This is a young team, as you mentioned. They got a lot of new guys. Typically in the past, they've gone out the last couple of years and got some stopgap guys. They brought in some younger players. But where do you think there are battles to be won in the lineup? Let's not look at the pitching yet. Let's look at the everyday lineup. Are there position battles in Clearwater?
It's funny you say that because there really aren't. It seems like any battles are going to involve pitching, and they're going to involve the bench. If you look at the outfield, we do know that they do have 4 quality outfielders for 3 spots, with Nick Williams and Aaron Altair and Odubel Herrera and now Rhys Hoskins as a regular fielder. But I think they're going to just try to mix and match those guys to keep them healthy. It seems like the way of the future is players looking to play a 140-game season and not a 162-game season. So I think that they like that they have 4 guys that can kind of slot throughout the outfield, and I think they're comfortable that Rhys Hoskins can go back and forth between first and the outfield, if he wants to spell Carlos Santana a little bit. So I think really there's really nothing to be fought over. What you will see is Scott Kingery trying to make a case that he needs to come up to the major leagues really soon. I don't think, however he plays this spring, he's going to make them force their hand and have them start in the major leagues. But I think also it would take a while for even Maikel Franco, who's had a disappointing couple seasons. I think he needs to be even go into a season and struggle there before they even consider displacing him from third. And he seems to be the one that people are looking at these days. So really it all seems kind of set in terms of the position players.
Frank, now that Freddie Galvis is gone, J.P. Crawford basically doesn't have that veteran guy above him. Going into now his first full big league season, what should we expect from him? Because last year, there was all the hype. He came up in September, and not that he was terrible, but you just didn't get the feel of, wow, this was really the payoff of all the hype for the last couple of years, which was to be expected. He's young. I mean, he's still going through his growing pains. But, what is realistic in his first big league season?
Well, I think last year J.P. Crawford impressed people with his glove. For all we heard about him in the minor leagues, he seemed to come up and perform like he was a well above average defender. And the fact that they threw him at third base for some just to sort of get his bat going. I think once he's turned over for shortstop, he's going to give you a He's going to give you a steady glove at shortstop, and I'd really like to see where his bat skill goes. I mean, a lot of that still needs to be shown on an everyday basis, but hopefully because he's got the shortstop position and it's his, and he's not looking over his shoulder. I mean, if you look at the guys they brought into camp who might be their backup shortstop, I mean, none of them are going to steal an everyday job. I mean, Adam Rosales is, I think he's 34 years old, and he might be the leading candidate to be a backup shortstop. Pedro Florimon, over 30 years old. So really, this is all his. And this season, J.P. Crawford's just going to be let loose. And I think that's what he needs, and that's what we need to see to say what he's going to give a Major League Baseball team. So I could see him hitting 270, no problem. And I think his defense, as much as people like Freddie Galvis' defense, and they should have liked Freddie Galvis' defense, I think he's going to provide a very smooth shortstop. And I wouldn't think he's going to totally fall off the face of the earth in terms of his batting average, but I think he will surprise some people that might be disappointed Freddie's gone.
Frank, I'm going to give you two players who were heavily scrutinized last season and really need to have a big season in different ways to kind of validate what their hard work has brought. Vince Velasquez and Maikel Franco.
Both of them are indeed probably pretty frustrating at the moment, because I think when you went into 2017, of all the players that were involved, you looked at Maikel Franco, you looked at Vince Velasquez, and you thought, okay, 2017 is going to show us what this guy is. Vince Velasquez did not step up and say, I'm a starting pitcher, period, and, exclamation point at the end of the sentence. And Maikel Franco did not really say, hey, look, I'm an above-average starting third baseman in this league. I think both of them, scouts still believe, have a lot of talent. And, 2018, I hate to see them sort of hit the reset button on what they tried to do with 2017. But in some respects, their leash is a lot shorter this year. If Maikel Franco is hitting well below average, or what you would expect him to do come June, well, Scott Kingery was taking balls at third base already in camp, and the position players aren't even supposed to report yet. I think then they'll make some moves there. Vince Velasquez, he might be in the same situation if he just keeps throwing 4 2/3 inning clunkers every now and then. When it's extra frustrating because he's got tremendous talent. But then they might have to make a decision come June 1st if something like that happens. So I think they don't have what they had last year, which is they had a whole season to kind of show what they are. But I definitely think that they still have the opportunity to show that they can be something for this Phillies team, but they'll be watching them very closely.
Yeah, Frank, one thing is that's interesting, too, with Franco is they don't really have a guy to push him, right? I mean, it's not like they brought a guy in here to kind of scare him, right?
No, they haven't, but they do have, we talked a lot heading into the off season about the Phillies trading their infield depth. They traded Galvis, they traded Hernandez, but Cesar Hernandez is a pretty versatile player. J.P. Crawford's a pretty versatile player. I don't think you want to make it so that Cesar Hernandez is your shortstop on an everyday basis. But if in a total disaster, I mean, they could always use Kingery and move people around and kind of make sure that they have all 4 positions covered. So they do have that. There's really no incumbent ready to take over, and I'm sure when we get to next off season, there'll be lots of talk about Manny Machado, especially depending on how well he plays this year.
Yeah, I find it interesting, Frank. I was doing a piece for the website the other day and doing some research for it. The Altair-Nick Williams duo combined for 31 home runs. I mean, that's pretty eye-opening when you think about it, those two guys. So is that kind of a straight platoon out in that right field position, or are those guys battling for an everyday job?
I think you're going to see Aaron Altair play a good amount of games, and I would venture to say he plays, provided everybody's healthy. I wouldn't be shocked if he plays 20 games in center field. Bulk of them in right field. I wouldn't be shocked if you see him in left field some too when Hoskins either has days off or where, I would imagine that when they play in American League ballparks, that creates another opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really think that there's going to be one player that you really kind of say is the loser in a battle. I really think that from everything I've seen and read and heard so far, it seems like Gabe Kapler likes to give them their days off to keep them fresh. And Altair and Williams, you look at a lot of teams. If you have three starting outfielders and you have to go to the fourth one so often, I mean, how often is that fourth outfielder somebody who's not good enough to start? These guys might be good enough to start,
right?
And you can kind of match them up. I would assume that if there is a left-hander starting, that Aaron Altair will either be in center field or right field that day. Maybe they'll pick their spots when they rest Herrera and when they rest Williams. But I don't really see so much of a battle such as, and I think I even heard Aaron Altair this offseason say, he's comfortable moving around from center to left to right, and he's a very talented fielder. I think he profiles best as a center fielder, and the fact that they can slot somebody like him in center and left and right is a very valuable piece. And I think in doing so, I don't think Hoskins is coming out of the lineup that much. And depending on how Herrera is performing, if he's getting on base a lot, he might push the envelope a little bit, but he's still going to need his days. Hoskins is still going to need his days. And again, you throw in the DH on occasion into the equation, and Carlos Santana getting a day off. There's going to be plenty of playing time for all four of them.
What's the I know Alfaro's going to be the catcher, right? Or are they going to kind of break that up? Because you do have Rupp, who obviously is a veteran, and you've got Knapp, who kind of took the starting job over towards the end of last year. So how are they going to work? Are they going to keep three catchers, or how's that working?
That's a good question, too. I don't think Cameron Rupp is going to be the starting catcher this year. At this point, you've invested all this time and effort into developing Knapp and Alfaro. And it's probably as of today, Alfaro's job as the starter when they open the season. I got to think Knapp is going to be on the roster too. Knapp has a little bit of versatility in him. He can play first base now and then, and he's a switch hitter. But I actually could see a scenario where Cameron Rupp is in AAA when the season begins. And wow. I know that he is paid a couple $1 million a year right now. Who knows? I mean, catchers are hard to find. Maybe somebody needs some help towards the end of spring training, and they make a trade. But I think it's Cameron's been a good guy, and certainly is a very nice guy, good teammate. In terms of who the better backstops are, I think they're Alfaro and Knapp at this point, and you really want to break camp with your best guys. It's kind of a shame they had Eric Fryer to stash at AAA in case they needed a veteran type. It could be a Lehigh Valley. Fryer ended up retiring. Ideally you would have this. Every team seems to have this quadruple A, as they might call him, catcher. A guy who has had some major league experience, who can go down to AAA, probably spends all the spring training with you, and then comes up in September, and then in between kind of comes up as necessary. So they might try to add somebody like that down the line if Cameron Rupp is moved, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that he begins in AAA.
Hey, Frank Klose is with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Of course, he covers the Phillies. He'll be in Clearwater in a couple of weeks here to cover the team. And before we get to some pitching questions here, you have a guess at the lineup. I tried to put the lineup together the other day, and it's a little tricky. I mean, who's this team's leadoff guy? Who hits number 2? Who's that 3 guy? Do they, I was trying to look around thinking, man, they got a lot of options with this team. The offense certainly has more depth and more. You could get more creative.
Well, I think creative is the key word, and I say that in, if you take every expectation you had for a lineup and how the lineup would be constructed traditionally, I would just throw that out of the window right now. I think Kapler is going to, look at some of the newer trends, which might be you put your best hitter second. It used to be the second hitter was the guy that you had, kind of hit a ball to the opposite side, move a runner up, who could sort of sacrifice bunt to get the runner to second base. But you might see someone like Carlos Santana, who used to profile as a number 3 or number 4 hitter. He might be your number 2 hitter. And you might have Rhys Hoskins batting third, which used to be the high average contact guy, not necessarily the power guy. The power guy we used to think was the cleanup hitter. But the way these trends are emerging, it's going to be really hard to say at this point what the lineup might look like. And a lot of it will have to be what Gabe Kapler's philosophy is, and that's something we're going to have to kind of figure out as spring training goes. And he might need to figure out who fits in his philosophy where. So that's something that we have to come up with.
Frank, let's look at the pitching because I don't know about you, but the pitching's thin. Nola, Eichhoff, they seem to be about the only two guys that you could pencil in definitively for the start of the season, right?
Yeah, here's the frustrating thing for the Phillies. They have Aaron Nola, and then they have a bunch of guys that all seem to have a lot of ability and high ceilings. If you just run down the list of names, so you have Eichhoff. I think Jared Eichhoff's going to be better than last year because it seems like he really did have a nagging injury the whole time. And I personally thought very highly of Jared Eichhoff heading into the season last year. So if Eichhoff works out, behind him, you have Velasquez, who we spoke about, you're kind of still looking to see who or what he is. You have the likes of Nick Pivetta, who has shown some good flashes, but hasn't really kind of taken the reins. And then who's going to be number 5? I think Ben Lively, Jake Thompson, Mark Leiter Jr. I always try to rattle these off quickly, and I always forget how many of them there are. Zach Eflin, Tom Eshelman is going to be starting to, get himself into the picture. So there are a lot of pitchers who are still pretty young, have some upside. And one thing I want to point out is right now they're all right-handed. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't try to make a trade with somebody and get somebody from the left side. The Phillies are still looking for a veteran starting pitcher. The other day I thought, though, that they might be looking at the Chris Tillman or the Jeremy Hellickson types kind of, and I don't know what Clay Buchholz is doing these days. We haven't really heard anything about him since he went down with that injury last year. But there's really not a lot of lefty options out there for starters. So they're very, very right-handed, and for a lot of cases they're very young. And I kind of wanted to see them take somebody like Nick Pivetta and see if they could build him into a really strong bullpen piece. But it seems like they really want to try to see if guys can start before for an extended period of time before they move them. Last spring I said go into camp, try to make Adam Morgan a left-handed reliever. Well, they still kind of played with him starting, and ultimately, if you look at him down the stretch, he was a very effective left-handed reliever, and hopefully he will remain one. But it's just there's just so many of them. There's so many of them that have their individual faults. Nobody's really stepped up and kind of taken the reins, and hopefully spring training will give them a clearer picture as to who is going to be worthy of those spots and who might get bumped to AAA just because there's not enough room on the roster. So it's kind of a shame that there are that many question marks. I know if they find the right veteran starter that can come into camp and kind of be an anchor, I think that would be very beneficial to the bullpen because you don't want to tax them too much.
Yeah.
But hopefully you won't see a revolving door where the two of the young guys are constantly back and forth for each other at AAA, and somebody will step up and say, I need to be a starter on this major league team and make the Phillies convinced of that.
Well, so many of these guys, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, we've been hearing about them for a long, long time. The J.P. Crawfords, the Rhys Hoskins, the Alfaros. Same with a lot of these pitchers, though. A lot of these pitchers came over in those deals, when they started to dismantle the 08 team, the Pivettas, the Livelies, the Eflins, the Jake Thompsons, and you're not really getting the ROI on those guys. Some of these guys have been around the organization now for 4 years, and I don't know that any of them has separated themselves from the pack here. So is there a wild card name that you're intrigued by that's kind of not in that I came over in a trade for an 08 player realm?
Tom Eshelman would be the one I think that would be the one that would have to leapfrog people. Now, Tom Eshelman, he's been pretty dominant in the minor leagues for them at AA and AAA, and he's in camp. They're going to give him a look. And, if he shows them something and says, look, this is my turn, I think they're going to listen. It seems like that he'd be leapfrogging over a lot of these other players. But there really is no there's so many of them. It's hard to find yet another name, but I think Eshelman's going to have a chance of all the players to really show that he should be up sooner than later. And if the others aren't performing well, or they don't like what they see in spring training, maybe he's going to have a shot.
Bullpen, they added to it in the offseason. I mean, that's an area where they did try to put some focus on, bringing back Nishak. They got Hunter back or over here. He's a veteran arm. So they did put some new pitching in this organization, just not in the starting rotation. What do you think about this bullpen and how it kind of breaks down?
I like it better than it was. I kind of think the Phillies still need to find their long-term solution as a closer. The numbers always show that Hector Neris struggled in the ninth inning. There's that old closer's mentality discussion. I mean, who knows? Maybe that he's got the help of Jim Gott in the bullpen. Maybe he'll get over that. Gott, a former closer himself. So we would like to see them get a straight closer who's been a closer. I would personally recommend if Greg Holland, some of the talk around Greg Holland, who had a tremendous season last year with the Colorado Rockies and his comeback. If he's available in a one-year pillow contract, as they would call it, where you give the guy a bunch of money for 1 year and let him reestablish his value, or perhaps in Greg Holland's case, show that last year wasn't a fluke and that he is really healthy, I would do something like that if I were the Phillies. Even if they trade him down the line, or if he leaves as a free agent, that'll kind of set up way better. But with Neris, Nishak, and with Tommy Hunter, they should be a lot more stable. What's going to kill the bullpen is what kills every bullpen, and that would be the starting pitching. If you keep getting 4 and 2/3 inning outings of from the likes of Vince Velasquez and Nick Pivetta at times, that's what's going to be their downfall. But if you're going to have a situation where the starters can go 6 innings most days, they certainly have enough guys that can get you to the end of the game if they're looking to secure some victories. But there still could be room for a closer, and I don't know if the Phillies are kicking around the idea of going after somebody like Holland, who is still on the market. Holland was looking for a big payday, but maybe they throw $15 million in 1 year out there and he takes it, and then next off season, when there are other closers on the market like Craig Kimball, maybe they make a long-term solution. But they seem as of now ready to give Neris an opportunity to be the closer. And if we see out of Neris differently than last year, if he really does take hold of that ninth inning and under the new leadership, then the job is going to be his.
Frank, the season starts today. What would you say? I know. Kapler's saying, we want to be bold. We want to make, we want to be a team that can win the NL East. But what would you say the ceiling for this season is?
Without another starter, I think it's fair to say they could be not 500, but maybe within a few games of 500. I think that would be the ceiling. If they add another starter that's decent, a reliable major league arm, and who knows where they're at in discussions with guys, because there's still so many pitchers available. The big names like Arrieta, Lynn, and Alex Cobb, I think they need to be off the board before they go to the next tier, which could still take a while. But if they add somebody, maybe they could be at or around 500, or maybe even a little bit better. When Larry Bowa came and took over in 2001, and you had that little jolt, they won 86 games. So I think if they get the same kind of energetic shock then, and they add a starter, I think that's the biggest stretch of the imagination we could get to at this point.
Frank Klose at Frank Klose with a K. The Phillies are back, and he will be with us all season long with the mailbag and his Phillies coverage at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, pal. Frank,
hey, great.
Spring training is back. I love it.
Yeah, great to talk to you guys.